All right. Settle down. The teller is here for UFC Mexico. And the main event, not only do we have two of the best flyweight fighters on planet Earth throwing down with each other, I think more significantly, you guys have to understand that we have two fighters squaring off that are two of the top 5 or top 10 most exciting fighters in all of MMA. Not just in a specific weight division, not just in the UFC, I would say almost in all of MMA. You guys know when Moreno and Royval step down in the cage, it's going to be a fun fight. Besides that, this fight card obviously filled with all of the top talent representing Mexico, which is going to translate to us seeing that warrior spirit in the cage. We're going to see a lot of fun fights, a lot of bloody fights, and this is going to be a fight card that really entertains, I do believe. So for those of you guys that are going through the card, you're not seeing the biggest of names, this is a different type of fight card. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we jump into the first fight, just want to say, maybe you guys noticed my mug looks a little bit cleaner. Been working on some things over here, filming with the new 4K type of setup, but I actually still need to work on some further things and it'll look even better moving forward. And let me not forget to mention the free play that we posted here on the channel, the underdog play on Ilia Topuria plus 115 that cashes. You guys can expect free plays to post up here on the channel periodically, and you guys can also expect just a lot more content coming your way. And shout out to everybody that's following me on Instagram at MMA Fortune Teller _ and on Twitter at the MMA Teller. If you're following me on Instagram, you're noticing that I'm putting out all different types of content, and I'm just starting to learn what I'm working on right now. So you're going to see more and more of that. And you see that here on the channel too. We're doing different types of videos, shorts and all that stuff. So I appreciate you guys more than you know. And I just want to say, we profit almost 9 units on UFC 280. We're coming into this card with a lot of units to play with, and I'm excited. All right, guys. So I hope I didn't talk your ear off there too much before we jump into the first fight. If you guys want to get in contact with me for anything, I got my email, my Instagram and Twitter all listed below. Just reach out to me, comment below under this video. And if you guys have any questions, and I'm working on some big stuff here behind the scenes, I cannot wait to show you what I'm working on. And let me also not forget to say, I'm supposed to be doing an interview in a couple days with Joe Pyfer Sr. So that'll be just some odd content that will come your way. I'm going to be working on all different types of stuff like that. Sorry guys, I got to get this message out before we jump into the first fight, but we have those timestamps listed below. You could jump to any specific fight that you want to, if you don't want to sit here and listen to the teller's ear caress, or excuse me, the teller's voice caress your ear too much, and you want to just get straight to the nitty gritty. All right, guys, with that all being said, let's jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA Fortune Teller. Yeah.
The MMA Fortune Teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have two Dana White's Contender Series alums, Muhammad Naimov taking on Erik Silva. Muhammad Naimov, a fighter that came into that fight on Dana White's Contender Series as a significant favorite and really dropped the ball in that fight. Lost to Colin Anglin. I would say his cardio did let him down a little bit in that fight. You do also have to take into consideration that fight took place back in 2020, so about 4 years ago. He's 29. I mean, he was around 25 years old, so obviously there's going to be some growing pains with a younger fighter. But he's very well-rounded. He brings in some serious tools to the cage. And since that loss, I do also need to mention, he took another loss against Olivier Murad. That's a fighter that I'm actually familiar with from back in the day. I used to watch him fight back when he was an amateur in the South Florida scene over at Fight Time Promotions. I actually saw him fight quite a few times. And, that is another questionable loss that was back to back on his resume there. So, he was really looking to be a fluke of a fighter at the time. But since that last loss, he's now on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fight winning streak. He's looking better and better. He seems to really be putting it all together. Has some respectable wins too over Nathaniel Wood and Jamie Malarkey. And the thing again that I like about him is that he's well-rounded. He's very physically strong. He can grapple. He can take you down and control you. As we saw, he had a lot of control time against Nathaniel Wood, and Nathaniel Wood is a high-caliber grappler, so that really says something there. I think there's a very likely avenue that he goes that way in this fight here, as we have seen. We have seen his opponent Erik Silva controlled down in the mat, and in his UFC debut, where he took an L against TJ Brown, he was controlled, I believe, almost 10 minutes in that fight. All right, so he was on his back for a significant amount of time. TJ Brown, a former college wrestler, has that skill set, but still, I would say that Naimov has just as good of wrestling as TJ Brown does, maybe even better. I don't know. I mean, time will tell, but I think he can take Erik Silva down to the mat and control him there. Another thing that I definitely want to note here is that in Erik Silva's victory over Anvar Avnar Boinzarov. Okay, if you guys remember him, excuse me there. I'm trying to get that name down for you guys, but I know one thing for sure, even though I can't pronounce his name perfectly, I know that he is a bit of a fluky fighter, and he's a fighter that probably never should have had that opportunity in Dana White's Contender Series. Since that loss to Erik Silva, he's taken a couple more losses to questionable competition. So I think that Erik Silva went out there, he looked good, and he kind of was just can crushing. You know, that's really what I think the case was. Also, Erik Silva, even though he only has 11 pro fights, he's newer to becoming a pro compared to what his age says, right? 36 years old. He's an older fighter physically. I know he doesn't have a lot of mileage, but he's still an older fighter. Naimov is a fighter that doesn't have a lot of mileage on him from an MMA standpoint, just 12 pro fights, and he's a fighter that is physically more in his peak, and I like Naimov here. I like Naimov. Like I said earlier, I think he's going to have some control time in this fight. I think on the feet he can more than hang with Erik Silva. I think he can land some big shots on the feet. Fights out of the southpaw stance, throws some spinning type attacks, and he's a dangerous dude. I think he's putting it together right now, and I think that he'll look just as good in this fight as he's been looking recently. Okay, guys. So let's go over to the betting line, where first and foremost we're going to start diving into more of a variety of lines. Okay, moving forward. So let's take a quick look at the over-under, where you're seeing the over 2.5 rounds right around plus 130. Okay, so you can get underdog odds on the over 2.5. I'm kind of favoring this fight going to a decision. I could see Naimov having that control time, like we said, and I don't know if he necessarily gets that finish. Silva is a fighter that he's been finished twice in his career, but both via sub. Naimov hasn't really shown to be a submission threat. Also, in that last fight we talked about earlier against TJ Brown, he was submitted again late in that fight, but he survived to like the very last minute of that fight. He was subbed with almost a minute left in the fight. He was for the most part hanging around down on the mat. Hey guys, real quick, I just wanted to let you know as we get to the second half, specifically a little bit earlier on, but by the second half of the card, we're talking more in depth on the prop bets. Okay, we have it all opened up, and we're talking about inside the distance type props. We're talking about method of victory and all that. So that's something that you guys are going to be seeing here on the channel a lot more moving forward. I hope you guys like that. Comment below, let me know what you think. We're talking a lot more than just the money line. We're talking all types of prop bets, and you'll see that kick in about halfway through this card, and you'll see that moving forward throughout all these prediction videos. Now let's go over to the betting line, where you're going to see that Naimov is a big favorite. He opened up as a minus 290 on my bookie. He's now minus 325. Naimov is a big favorite, and I don't really have that much of a problem with it where it's at right now. Once it starts getting minus 360, 375 and above, I think you could be pushing it a little bit, but I feel pretty comfortable that Naimov gets the job done here. And I think even where the line is now, I wouldn't argue with you if you were throwing that in a 2-teamer or something like that. Now the over under for this fight right now, the over 2.5 rounds is at plus 130 at some underdog odds there. It's a little tricky to say if this fight goes over or under. Naimov is a fighter that really hasn't gone out and been getting submissions in his victories, and that's been the one way Erik Silva hasn't reached the final bell, has been by getting subbed. And even in his last fight where he was subbed by TJ Brown, it was with only like a minute left. He did survive down on the mat for a long period of time. I could see this fight playing out similarly, where Silva kind of survives, doesn't get subbed, but maybe Naimov's raining down some ground and pound and just dominating the fight or taking over the fight. I could see the over potentially hitting there. I don't say it with a lot of confidence, but I will throw some over and unders your guys' way. And I would say there's probably more value on the over 2.5 at plus 130 rather than chalking up a minus 165 or so on the under 2.5 rounds. We'll see how that goes. Naimov does throw some heat on the feet. Maybe he clips Silva there, but Silva has shown to be pretty tough. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes there. But I like Naimov to get the job done one way or another. He should be the superior fighter who's really hitting his groove right now. Erik Silva, I think that we're going to see that he's not as good as that performance we saw in Dana White's Contender Series. That was a little bit of a can-crushing type of performance. This one's definitely going to be a fun fight. in the flyweight division. Victor Altamirano taking on Felipe dos Santos. Felipe dos Santos, let's talk about him first. Just made his UFC debut against one of the hottest fighters in the division, and he held his own, right? He was a massive underdog against Manil Cape, and he did hold his own in that fight. He showed that he has a granite chin. He has that typical shoot box type style. He's marching forward with the Muay Thai stance. He's well-rounded. He's aggressive. I mean, I really feel that at just the age of 23 years old, he made a name for himself in that UFC debut. The loss that he had, in that loss, he made a name for himself. Now we'll see where he takes it from there. Obviously, you got to get some W's, and I think the UFC kind of gave him a nice little matchup here. Victor Altamirano is not a bad fighter, but he definitely has some flaws in his game. He's an unorthodox type of striker. I definitely feel there's some Tony Ferguson vibes to him, maybe like a poor man's Tony Ferguson in the flyweight division. He's tricky. I believe he's actually a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well. He's decently well-rounded, has some subs, has a couple knockouts there, and he can hold his own on the feet. But his striking, like I said earlier, a little unorthodox. It's a little wild, goes a little bit from east and west, and I love the matchup that Felipe has with his more technical striking. With his striking is just straight to the nose. It's very sharp. I think he's going to have success with the calf kicks, the leg kicks. He's going to have success with the boxing. And if Victor lands a couple shots on him, the chin that Felipe showed to have in that Cape fight, it's like you have to kind of bank or kind of rely on him surviving any type of onslaught that Victor has, or any type of big shot that he counters with, right? Because that could be the danger in a fight like this, is that as these men go to war, Victor could potentially throw an unorthodox type of shot that creeps up on Felipe and clips him. But the chin that Felipe showed in the fight was just amazing. I say that even if he gets hit with a couple shots here and there, that he should survive and push forward, and then he will have the higher volume landed in this fight. And I'm on Felipe dos Santos here. 10 years younger. Less amount of pro fights. He's still more of a green fighter, but he is on the fast track, training over at Shootbox. You know that he's just getting in some serious scraps in the gym. He's training hard. He's training and surrounding himself with some of the best. And I like him to win this fight. I was really impressed with how he looked in his UFC debut. So he's another very big favorite on this fight card, which I do want to note to you guys, there's a lot of big favorites on this fight card. There's a lot of fighters in that minus 300 range. That's why we're going to talk about some over and unders and stuff like that. We'll talk about some props that you might want to target. But Felipe dos Santos, I like him to get the job done. I'm not going to argue with you if you think he's a potential parlay piece also in the minus 300 range. I think he gets the job done here. We need to see a little bit more from him. And you also just note that Victor is a game opponent that's grinding hard. He's going to have the hometown edge, of course, representing Mexico. That's something that he'll have there if the fight plays out somewhat closely. Maybe he sneaks a decision in, but I think that Felipe dos Santos is going to land. He's going to be sharper. Now with the over under, I'm favoring that this fight does go to a decision, and the line kind of reflects that as well in the over under, as it's a minus 260 to go over 2.5 rounds. Two lighter weight guys that are probably going to trade. Both these guys have shown to be pretty durable and tough. Victor Altamirano has only been subbed once. Has only been finished once out of his 15 pro fights. So he's been a pretty durable dude as well. But Felipe should land cleaner, land harder, and just be the quicker fighter out there, the more technical fighter. We'll stick around in the flyweight division. We got Denise Bondar taking on the UFC newcomer Luis Rodríguez. Rodríguez, just 24 years old, representing Mexico. He actually fought on Dana White's Contender Series a while back, if you guys remember, and took a loss to Jerome Rivera. He was only 20 years old at the time, but Jerome Rivera is possibly on the Mount Rushmore for the worst UFC careers of all time. He fought 4 times in the UFC. He was finished in 3 of them. He was convincingly beat by Francisco Figueiredo as well. So that Jerome Rivera loss, not looking the best on Luis Rodríguez's resume. But again, understand that he was 20 years old and he has grown since that fight. So since that loss, he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 victories in a row. He's 25 years old. He's more physically mature. But I will say, even as I break down tape on some of his more recent fights, I have not been impressed with him. He's slow. He's plotty. You would think that he'd be a little bit quicker fighting in the flyweight division, having some knockout victories as well. He really looks to set up. He kind of headhunts a little bit. He looks to set up that big shot, and I think that could be a little bit of a problem for him here. I think Bondar should have a speed advantage. Bondar is decently well-rounded as well. He's a well-rounded fighter, I would say. He doesn't do one thing necessarily the best. We saw he had his moments against Carlos early on. But let's also talk about this. Bondar, hard to gauge him in the cage, right? He got injured early on against Malcolm Gordon, so we didn't really get to see anything from him there. And the Carlos Hernandez fight, he was knocked out essentially from a takedown. If you remember, Hernandez took him down and kind of drove through with his forehead into the chin or to the cheek of Bondar, and Bondar was knocked out from that. So they kind of overturned that fight. But Carlos Hernandez was in control of that fight. He was outstriking Bondar, and you could even argue that was a legitimate knockout. But Bondar is very, very hungry to get back not even get back in the win column, to get that first UFC victory. I edge him here. He's more in his physical prime, 31 years old. I think he's more hungry here. He has his back against the wall. He needs to get this W. It's probably will be the last time we see him in the cage, in the UFC cage, if he doesn't get the win. And Luis Rodríguez just doesn't really impress that much. Bondar also will have a 4-inch reach advantage. He's a little bit quicker. The one thing that worries me a little bit is that Luis Rodríguez, if he lands a big shot, Bondar's chin was just brutally impacted just 8 months ago. Right, we saw how that went for Volkanovski after coming off a brutal knockout. Sometimes people underestimate the impact it has on a fighter when he's brutally knocked out and then he comes back in for that return fight there. So that's a question mark. All in all, though, I do like Bondar to get the job done. I'll edge him. As you look around at different books, you'll notice that Bondar is a slight favorite on some, and then on the other hand, Luis Rodríguez is a slight favorite. But it is essentially pick 'em odds, so it just depends what book you're looking at. I like Bondar here. I like edging the Bondar at the pick 'em line based on some of the things we talked about. The over-under, I'll favor the over. It's at -170 and not really seeing an extreme amount of value there. If we do see a finish, I'm aiming more towards Rodríguez clipping Bondar at the big shot, or maybe Bondar can pull off a sub. We've seen him pull off a good amount of subs throughout his career, all against low-level competition, though. Hard to say there, but I like Bondar to get his hand raised. I do like the matchmaking that was done here. Fight taking place in the lightweight division. We got two young guns, Claudio Puelles, the Peruvian prince, taking on Faraz Ziam, a phenomenal striker, a very rangy striker. And the stylistic clash is obviously that Ziam is the much more polished and comfortable fighter when it comes to the striking. And then when it comes to the grappling, Claudio Puelles is he's a stud down there. I mean, he's one of the best fighters we've ever seen in the cage as far as pulling off knee bars go and leg locks go. But not even just that, he's a very well-rounded BJJ player. Understand that. He's very dangerous in his guard, and he's dangerous off his back. And if he gets this fight down to the mat, I think that Faraz Ziam could be in some real trouble. Now, both of these fighters kind of mirror each other in the way that Faraz Ziam has been putting in some serious work on his grappling. You've seen the development. We saw the nice Polish throw against Mike Figlak. We saw a nice little takedown in that fight. Against Jamie Malarkey, he also showed some flashes too. Malarkey trying to spam the takedowns and whatnot, got him down, but Ziam constantly getting back up to his feet, even had a couple of reversals down in the mat. So we see the growth coming from him there. And then on the other hand, Claudio Puelles, he has a heavy power body kick that he likes to throw in the mix on the feet, has decent hands. He's working on his striking. But I would feel comfortable saying that either fighter, if they keep the fight in their world, or get the fight to their world, in Puelles' case, if he gets it down to the mat, there's a chance that there could be some serious problems for the other fighter. Okay. Ziam, I expect him to get the better of the striking. Like I said, he has to keep it there. He will outstrike Puelles, but if Puelles gets just one takedown, I think that the submission threat is very live. Okay. I do believe that. Pulled off subs over Guida, Chris Grutzmacher, Felipe Silva. And again, he's tricky, man. He goes after the legs, and Ziam has some long, lanky legs that Puelles could potentially get a hold of. Now, for Faraz Ziam, just want to talk about him real quick. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He outstruck Jai Herbert 2-1 on the feet. Okay, that is impressive, because Jai Herbert is a stud boxer himself. All right, and Herbert also fighting out of the southpaw stance, so that's something that Ziam has seen recently. But you also do note that Ziam was taken down in that fight, or not even taken down. It wasn't an official takedown, but he was reversed and he was controlled for over 4 minutes, almost an entire round down on the mat. And if Puelles gets over 4 minutes of control time down on the mat, I think there's a likelihood that he pulls off a sub. So that's the danger here in this fight. And just real quick, I want to talk about Ziam because ever since he made his UFC debut against Don Madge, where Madge was a Muay Thai specialist who was a more mature fighter at the time, Don Madge wanted nothing to do with the striking of Ziam. That's how much he respected the striking of Ziam even back then when Ziam was just a young kid making his debut. Don Madge just held him against the cage and snuck off a decision there. After that, victories over Jamie Malarkey, which he showed to have been working on his grappling. He was able to avoid being controlled down there. Victory over Luigi Vendramini. Now, he had that tough loss to Terrence McKinney. That's a little bit of an alarming performance because he was subbed early on. But note that Terrence McKinney is a much better wrestler than Puelles, right? So he's able to get that. He was able to get the fight down to the mat potentially much easier. He was able to get it down to his world or that avenue. I wouldn't say his world because McKinney can strike it out with you as well, but Puelles may struggle more so to get the fight down to the mat. He might be trying to do some type of Amanari roll or try to pull guard or do something like that. I don't see anything from him that's too impressive as far as his offensive wrestling goes. And then victories over Mike Figlak, where I told you he threw that nice Polish throw takedown. Ziam working on the offensive wrestling, and he outstruck Jai Herbert 2-1. Which is pretty impressive there because Jai Herbert is a solid striker, but he was on his back a little bit like we talked about. All right, so let's get to the betting line here. Let's cut to the chase. For us, Ziam right now, he opened up on my bookie at a minus 230 and bounced to a 240, back to 230, a little bit back and forth, 230 to 240. One thing is for sure that Ziam is a pretty hefty favorite right now. Okay, he's almost a 2.5 to 1 favorite. I would say that's decently high when you take into consideration the threat that Puelles will have to pull off the sub and or to use his grappling. I've been a little back and forth on how I feel about this line. I like Ziam a lot, and if this line came down just a little bit, if he was like a flat minus 200 or minus 190, I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable with it. That's kind of where I'm standing with the line right now. If this line is 230, 240, 250, I don't know. I may stay away from it. I'm kind of on the fence here. This is a tricky one. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't want to just BS and throw something out your guys' way. I've been very much on the fence with this line. I like Ziam, but give me, for us, Ziam to win a decision. Once again, we got a fight taking place in the flyweight division. Now, you guys know this fight is a fight that was a little frustrating for me the first time they stepped into the cage. Remember, we had that premature stoppage where the referee definitely did drop the ball. He should have waited to have made sure that Lacerda was out or that he was really tapping before stepping in. But I do also feel that Lacerda kind of played that a little bit. I think that Edgar Cháirez actually had that locked in. I had a nice little 2-team parlay that would have cashed, but it was what it was. And Cháirez, early on in that fight, he was landing nice. We have a little bit of tape already to go on when we're talking these two fighters. Cháirez was landing some nice shots. I think that he was definitely in control of the striking. He actually fell down to his back quickly in that fight. It was kind of awkward the way he went down to his back, but he quickly jumped back up to his feet, and that's when he eventually locked in that nice little standing guillotine type sub. So one thing that not a lot of people realize about Cháirez is that, which I've kind of discovered from diving into his resume and his tape and whatnot, he's actually a way more well-rounded fighter than some people believe. His striking is his bread and butter, as we saw in Dana White's Contender Series when he lost to Clayton Carpenter. He still looked very good on the feet, landing some big shots with his hands, but he's a well-rounded fighter. And even though he had a couple of hiccups early on in his career, he has definitely put it together as of recently. That's the thing I'll say about Cháirez. This is a fighter that is peaking as a fighter. Maybe I shouldn't say peaking, but he is on the up and up, right? He's rapidly growing in front of her eyes, and he's a good fighter. Lacerda, on the other hand, may we also bring up the fact that we talked about fighters early on. We talked about Jerome Rivera. Funny enough, in the same division, we talked about fighters being on Mount Rushmore for having the worst UFC careers. Let's talk about Lacerda's resume. Knocked out against Jeffrey Molina, submitted by Francisco Figueiredo, knocked out by Victor Altamirano, and knocked out by CJ Vergara. And then he should have been subbed by Edgar Cháirez. So when it's all said and done, when he gets finished again in this fight, he should have essentially been finished 6 times in the UFC, okay? Put him up on the Mount Rushmore with Jerome Rivera. You could have him being the George Washington, kind of with his head tilted this way. You got Rivera the other way. They're kind of giving each other a little glance there. All right, that's how I feel about this fight. Let me not go on too much about it. I will say this, though. On a more serious note, even though I definitely have Cháirez winning this fight, Lacerda has shown to be a little bit dangerous against lower level competition. He's a very aggressive fighter. That's what I'll say. He's a very aggressive fighter, but I just don't see it. And yes, I believe he's a team shoot box fighter as well, but he's a fighter that he kind of is a bad look for them, right? A lot of these fighters fighting at a shoot box, they put that name in high regard. Lacerda, tough dude, but just seems to be like the weak link over there, in my opinion. I have Edgar Cháirez getting a finish here. And if you want to throw that in a 2-team parlay or something like that, I would not be opposed to that. Now, this line opened up at -400, which was a lot higher than you could have caught it the first time around, because we saw how that played out. So the line opens up a little higher, even touched 425, but it's back down to 375 on my bookie, and still a little high. But Cháirez he's good, man. He's technical. He's durable. He's been durable for a while now. He had a couple little hiccups early on in his career, but he's been very durable as of recently. And defensively, he's been much more sharp with the hands up. And I think that he avoids being finished, and he's just a superior fighter, and he gets that finish himself. Once again, we're in the men's flyweight division. In fact, there are 5 fights on this card taking place in the men's flyweight division. That is quite a lot of them. Jesus Aguilar taking on Mateus Mendonça. Jesus Aguilar, representing Mexico, will have the crowd behind him without a doubt. He's a fun fighter to watch. He's coming off a brilliant first round knockout over Shannon Ross, and we understand that Shannon Ross's chin was diminished even before going into that fight. But still, the way that Aguilar just ran across the cage and threw that overhand right and cracked him, I loved watching that. I love the confidence from Aguilar. He is a real man's man type of fighter. If you break down tape on him, you guys will know what I'm talking about. He also has a very sneaky guillotine choke. That is something he has in his back pocket. It's nasty. We saw him pull that off on DWCS, and he's pulled it off a couple times as a pro. Now, his one loss as of recently, and you take note, he has 2 losses, both by way of sub, but the one recently was against Tatsuro Taira, who you guys know. I don't really think I need to go on too much about it. I'm very, very high on. He got caught in a sub early on. It was late in the first round. It was what it was. Taira is just a different beast, in my opinion. And before that, he was subbed all the way back in 2015. It was a long time ago, 9 years ago. And speaking of that guillotine choke I was talking about, actually has a guillotine submission over Edgar Cháirez, who we were just talking about a little bit ago, a fighter that I'm very high on. Edgar Cháirez got submitted by him. That was but 20 seconds left to go in the fight, okay? So Jesus Aguilar has fought in 5-round fights for championship belts. He's a tough fighter. He definitely needs to refine some things. I could potentially see Mendonça being a little bit more polished with his striking, maybe a little bit more athletic, a little bit quicker potentially. But you know, there's some alarming things that we could talk about in regards to Mendonça. Okay, Mendonça is a fighter, first and foremost, coming on to DWCS, where he did have a good performance, got the job done over Ashika Jim, got that first round knockout. We didn't get to see a lot from him in that fight. He had the knockout within 48 seconds. Ashika Jim has since shown to be kind of a fluke of a fighter, right? Everyone was talking about him. Chael Sonnen was talking about him on his channel. He just got knocked out again after that fight and didn't really have that much of a resume going into that fight. He was 6-0, I think, undefeated. Okay. Gets pretty much dominated by Javid Basharat, which Basharat's a very talented fighter, but still, he was dominated in that fight, controlled on the mat quite a bit. And before that, it's very hard to pull up any tape on him. Okay, that's what I wanted to note as well. And then in his last fight, you want to pull up some tape, pull up the tape of him against Nate Maness, where he's fishing for leg locks and whatnot. Nate Maness is smashing his face through the canvas. Okay, so showing to have some questionable decision making in his fights. That just took some serious damage to his chin. I think Jesus Aguilar will have the durability edge in this fight. Now, Jesus Aguilar will also be at almost a 10-inch, or excuse me, no. He'll be at almost a 12-inch, an entire foot reach disadvantage. But Jesus Aguilar knows how to get into the inside. He closes distance well. And I don't think that will be as much of an issue as maybe some of you guys believe it to be. I am more worried about the durability of Mendonça after just getting starched the way that he did get starched. I'm more worried about that, I think, than that reach advantage. And I'll tell you why. I think this is going to be a firefight. I think this is going to be a fight on the card. You could pencil it down where these guys are going to go at it. I think this is going to be a scrap. And I'm more worried about Mendonça not holding up. I'm also more worried about Aguilar maybe getting in on some hips, lifting him up, taking him down. He's very physically strong. He needs to work on polishing up his skill set overall, like I said, with the striking and the grappling, but he's very physically strong. He's very mentally tough, and he brings in those variables, and he continues to polish his game up as he's still young, only 27 years old. And I think he's going to be more game here. I'm going to take the underdog here. That's the route I'm going. Has that guillotine choke in his back pocket. He subbed some Brazilian fighters before, some high-level shouldn't say high level, but some decently respectable opponents from Brazil, right? Talking about the DWCS fight. That was a decently respectable opponent. Give me Jesus Aguilar to get the job done. And we'll take a look at the betting line as he opened up at even odds, and we see some slight action going the other way. So right now, Aguilar is a plus 120. So the action coming in on Mendonça, and I'm not necessarily in agreement there. I think this is a close fight, but I would be wary, especially if you're targeting Mendonça. If he gets up to minus 145, 160, anywhere there, I think that there's no value there, and I would definitely caution you. We'll see, though. We'll see. Mendonça had a rapid knockout on DWCS, showed a little bit of a flash there, has that reach advantage. Maybe he can land some strikes from the outside. But I like Aguilar. Something tells me that Aguilar shows up, has the crowd behind him, and he delivers for the Mexican fans out there. Once again, we got Team Mexico versus Team Brazil here on this card. Cristian Quiñonez, the much younger fighter, almost a decade younger at 27 years old, taking out Raoni Barcelos. Raoni Barcelos, at one point in time, was the dark horse of this division. He was a national wrestling champ over in Brazil, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a fighter that really showcased some slick striking skills, a very well-rounded fighter. But we saw age catch up with him, and I would say more than just age. I think we saw mileage catch up with him. I think he's a fighter that probably trained hard in the gym for years, and we saw him start to slow down, and it really was all showcased in the Victor Henry fight was really where it was showcased, because he was a massive favorite in that fight, and he did not look that good, or looked really bad in that fight, but did lose to Timur Valiev before that. Valiev, a talented fighter, was recently knocked out against Umar Nurmagomedov, and lost a decision to Carler Phillips. We're talking about high-level fighters in the division. In between that, he did sneak in a win over Trevin Jones, who has since been cut by the UFC. Now, when you break down tape on Raoni Barcelos, or if you remember watching his fights, there has been a clear change in his skill set in the cage. And I say that because you see his reaction time is just a tad bit slower. You see it 100%. He's more vulnerable to being hit with strikes. He's trying to move out the way, and you see he's just a tad bit slower. He gets tagged a lot more often these days. And that could be an issue if Cristian Quiñonez can land a big shot in this fight, because we have seen Barcelos absolutely starched, like in the Nurmagomedov fight. So his chin can be completely cut off. There's no question about it. Cristian Quiñonez can cut the lights off on him. That being said, we just saw Quiñonez exploited down in the mat by a fighter that doesn't have near the grappling skill set of a Barcelos, right? Quiñonez was just, I think he was hit with the rear naked choke by the Korean fighter there. A fighter that actually liked Kyung Ho Kang. He was submitted with the rear naked choke in the first round, so kind of exploited down on the mat. I could easily see Raoni Barcelos doing something similar to that. He has the ability to get the fight down to the mat with his wrestling credentials and the skill set there. He sets up his takedowns nice. He'll start mixing up the striking, and then he'll shoot in, and I could see him getting this fight down to the mat, and I could see him pulling off a sub. He's definitely fighting with his back up against the wall with the amount of L's that he's been taking and being up there in age. He is on the verge of being cut by the UFC if he loses here. Okay, so he's going to be extremely motivated here. He's going to be more experienced. I think that this is a fight. You see him sparring with Davi Ramos, a very respectable fighter too. This is a fight that Barcelos has to come out and get. He's the superior fighter here. He'll be at a little bit of a reach disadvantage. Quiñonez is long for the division. He has some serious pop. We saw that knockout that he just had against Khalid Taha in his UFC debut. Had a nice showing on Daniel White's Contender Series against Long Xiao, the Chinese fighter, where he got the job done there and went 15 minutes. He's definitely a sharp striker, but Raoni Barcelos, he can strike with him as well, but doesn't want to play that game for too long. He just needs to set up the takedowns. You got to go with Barcelos here, in my opinion. He's just, this is a fight where you kind of look at like the youngster versus the old veteran. This is a fight that stands out to me where you see the veteran coming in and kind of using his craftiness to get the job done. So hopefully Barcelos does not drop the ball here and get cut from the UFC and get starched by Quiñonez in Quiñonez's home country. It wouldn't be a fun experience for him, to say the least there. So Barcelos right now is a minus 180 favorite on my bookie. Opened as a minus 170, dipped down to a minus 200. It dips back. So people a little bit wary about his chin. and it's understandable. Defensively, he has looked a lot slower. I like Barcelos even at this line. I would like Barcelos even anywhere from -210 down. I think the value's still more on his side. I could see him having success with the grappling here. And like I said, I think he's going to fight a smarter fight. He has to fight a smart fight. And this is a fight. Let's take a look at where the under's at on this fight, because the under 2.5 rounds is at -110. Interestingly enough, opened at +155. And that makes more sense because I kind of favor the under even at pick 'em odds here. So +155, there was some value. I'm thinking we see Barcelos potentially get a sub here, and if he slips up, he can get cracked and get finished. So I like the under. I like the under 2.5 rounds here. I like Barcelos via submission potentially. And Barcelos, I know he's a fighter that really hasn't had that many subs, but make no mistake, he is a high caliber BJJ player. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and you watch him down on the mat, man. He knows what he's doing down there. Not exactly sure why he only has one sub. He's been getting some knockouts and he does control guys down the mat, but Quiñonez has been subbed twice. Half of his losses have come by way of sub, and in fact, in all 4 of his losses, he's been finished. So I think Barcelos can find a sub or find a finish some way, and I'm aiming under. I'm aiming inside the distance for Barcelos. I think Mexico is going to be going wild with this one. Manuel Torres taking on Chris Duncan. Manuel Torres, a bona fide finisher. I mean, that's what he does when he steps into the cage. Almost half of his victories are by way of knockout, and since he's been fighting under the UFC banner, that's all he's been doing. Now, it is worth noting that the finish he had on Dana White's Contender Series was a little sketchy, as his opponent Colton kind of got eye poked. But I loved the killer instinct that Torres had in that fight. He wasn't waiting for the ref to stop it or butt in. He ran in, he finished that fight up. Then he goes out there, knocks out the veteran Frank Camacho, and then knocks out Nicholas Mota with one of the nastiest knockouts we've ever seen in the cage. The way he had that step in elbow switching stances was beautiful. I think that he really is a very talented striker. He knows how to fight at range. He knows how to use his footwork to get on the inside and crack, as we saw with that elbow. And that has a recipe for disaster for Chris Duncan, if you ask me. That's a recipe for disaster in regards to Chris Duncan, if you ask me. Because Chris Duncan, although he is a fighter that has some power, and if you slip up fishing for that finish on him, he can crack you and knock you out as well. Duncan is a fighter that has some defensive flaws on the feet, and we've seen that from him, and there's no question about it. First off, on his first stint on Dana White's Contender Series, he gets knocked out brutally by Slava Borishev. Slava Klaus gets a victory. Then he fights Charlie Campbell. Charlie Campbell, if he would have just composed himself a little bit, he was seconds away from getting a finish on Duncan on the feet. Once again, Duncan was getting tagged up, and then Charlie Campbell got hit with a counter, and he got knocked out there. So just an error on Campbell's part. And then after that, he gets 2 victories in a row, but really using his wrestling and his grappling to get the job done, which is going to be exactly what Duncan's going to need to do to get a W, in my opinion, against Torres, because Torres will get the better of the striking exchanges. Duncan will try to work the calf kick, and he'll threaten a little bit with some power shots, but the longer they play that game, I think he'll get outstruck. And not only that, I think that he will get knocked out. That's what I foresee happening in this fight. In fact, I think that Duncan is going to finally get knocked out once again under the UFC banner. Manuel Torres, like I said, switching stances. He's fluid. He'll have about a 1-inch reach advantage. Nothing really going on there, but he's a rangy fighter. Duncan's is not a small guy either. He's a solid dude for the division. Duncan's been putting in a lot of work, or has put in work with ATT, so he's trained with some of the best of them, and I expect him to come into this fight with an intelligent game plan. Duncan will be looking to grapple. He will try to get this fight down to the mat, and he'll try to edge out a victory. Mark my words, I don't see him playing around with Torres too much on the feet. Maybe for a little bit here and there when he has to. He's tough. He's tough there, and he will when he has to, but he will resort to the grappling. And if Torres' takedown defense is on par, he's going to light him up. How about the numbers here? I mean, these numbers are skewed, but still, check this out. 9.66 strikes landed per minute for Torres, while just absorbing 3.76. Duncan with a high number 2, 5.08, slightly above average. But in his last 2 fights, really resorting to the grappling, in my opinion, and watch the tape and you'll see what I'm talking about. I like Manuel Torres to get the job done here. Now, Manuel Torres, he opened up as a -200 on my bookie, and he's now a -150. And not too long ago, he was a -130. So some massive line movement here Okay, so there could be some information coming out on Duncan. Like I said, he trains with some of the best of them. Maybe they're thinking that Duncan's going to come in here with a little bit more of that experience with the grappling and try to take this fight down to the mat there and have some success, as he has proven to do in his last 2 fights. You can kind of bank on him fighting a smarter fight as of recently. I'm still on Torres. The crowd will be going crazy. I think they'll be pushing the pace in this fight. The crowd will be loud. The referee will be quick to split them up if they're hanging on the cage, if Duncan's hanging on him, and they're going to have some exchanges. And Torres, I like what I've seen from him. I think he cracks Duncan, and we all are jumping out of our chairs. So let's take a look at the under here, and we'll see what we're talking about. The under 1.5 round is at 210 on my bookie. Okay, so that says everything you need to know. I mean, the under is a hefty favorite. We're thinking we see a finish in this fight, and I think that finish is definitely being targeted from the Torres side of things. So give me Manuel Torres to get a first-round knockout. Hey, guys, real quick, if you're looking to sign up to a new sportsbook, reach out to me. You're going to get some benefits here. You're going to get an added bonus to your account, but more importantly, I'm going to give you a free month for my official picks. You get a free month package. All you got to do is sign up through my referral link. Reach out to me. I'll give you the details. You sign up and you're good to go. I love Bovada.lv. I got a Fat Boy account that I'm working with right now after this past weekend for after UFC 298. So I'm loving it. We're hitting up hockey plays during the week. We're hitting up basketball plays, and we're waiting for baseball and of course the NFL to come back eventually. But I love playing around on Bovada.lv during the week and then getting serious on the weekends for these UFC events. Reach out to me if you're looking to join. We got one of the hottest prospects in all of mixed martial arts here in Yazmin Jauregui. And yes, I know she's coming off a tough first round knockout loss. She's taking on Sam Hughes here. Yazmin's still only 24 years old. I want to be very clear. That loss that she just took was just a hiccup, a little bit of a mental mistake in there. Got a little bit too overzealous. She was a little bit too offensive. She should have slowed things down. I really believe if she fights Denise Gomes, who is a talented fighter, if she fought her 100 times, I would say that Yazmin would win 90 something of those fights. Okay, so it was just an off night at the office. Finished Estela Nunez in devastating fashion before that. Had a decision victory over Yazmin Lucindo in her UFC debut. When you actually understand how talented Yazmin Lucindo is as well, and how much of a promising career she has ahead of her, that you understand that was a big victory there in her debut. Now, Yazmin is only 24 years old. She is the most polished aspect of her game is her striking, without a doubt. I mean, she's so fun to watch on the feet. She's so fluid. She's so technical. And once she just starts figuring the overall game out, and I'm not talking about just the grappling. I'm talking about the mental aspect of the game, and that's what cost her in her last fight. When she figures all this out, she's going to be a very dangerous fighter. This is a fighter that could easily be fighting for the belt before she's even 30 years old. I mean, she has plenty of time still. She's so young, and I think this is a perfect bounce back fight for her. Now, if you want to play devil's advocate, Sam Hughes is a fighter that just went out and defeated a big prospect in the game, in Jacqueline Amorim. A fighter that is trained over at American Top Team, a fighter that people are high on her potential. Before that, she lost to Piero Rodríguez. 2 victories before that, also as a win over Estela Nunez, and went out there and really sandpaged Elise Reed with the ground and pound and whatnot. She looked good in that fight. She's had her ups and downs. Sam Hughes is a decently well-rounded fighter. She will strike with you. She'll go the grappling route. She'll do a little bit of it all. I just don't think she's going to be able to do what she just did to Jacqueline Amorim in her last fight, where she doubled her up on strikes, 107 to 52. I don't see her doing anything similar to that against Yazmin. 7 minutes of control time for Sam Hughes as well. I mean, that's something maybe keep an eye on. But Yazmin, man, she seems like she's figuring the game out pretty quickly. She's technically sound. I think she uses proper footwork and lands some damaging shots on Sam Hughes. And Sam Hughes, you take a look at some of her loss that she's taken recently in the octagon. All 3 of her last losses coming by way of decision. She was knocked out by Tisha Torres back in 2020, 4 years ago. Submitted by Vanessa Demopoulos. That was an LFA. I believe that was a championship fight as well over an LFA. I don't believe that we're going to see that much of a threat there from Yazmin. Yazmin is a striking first fighter. Okay. So doesn't have one sub yet. So it's going to come down to the striking. Yazmin's going to branch off the striking to set up everything, kind of control the cage and use her footwork and use her offense to play out defensively as well. Just throwing so much damage at Sam Hughes that Sam doesn't feel comfortable in there, and she's able to get in on some hips or get this fight down to the mat and get the fight more towards her world. Okay. That's what I see here. So let's take a look at the betting line here, as Yazmin opened up as a minus 375 favorite on my bookie. She's now a minus 500. Heavy action coming her way. Wouldn't be surprised if we see her settle in as like a minus 700 by the time this fight starts. I think we're going to continue to see action come in on her. People feel a little less nervous about fights being ended abruptly in these types of fights, right? A women's strawweight fight, even though that was the case in Yazmin's last fight where she was knocked out in the first round, people still tend to be a little bit less wary of that situation. And then when it comes to just an overall skill standpoint, Yazmin should be a step ahead and she should dominate this fight. I think maybe the real question is does Yazmin get a finish here? Sam Hughes has been pretty durable. You take a look at her 5 losses. I think she was only finished in 2 of them. 1 knockout, 1 sub, 3 decisions. The over 2.5 rounds is set at minus 220. So it opened at 350, action going the other way, but we're obviously still favoring that this fight is going to go to a decision. A women's strawweight fight. Can Yazmin maybe land some devastating punches and stop this fight? Maybe you could find some value there. See what line you can get as far as that goes. I don't know if you guys could see this. It's a little bit on the side here, but Yazmin Jauregui to win inside the distance is set at plus 150 on Bet Online, and maybe you could find some value there. I don't know if that's the route you want to go. Taking a woman strawweight fighter to get a finish. But I'm telling you, Jauregui fights with a real killer instinct, and she's going to be the sharper striker here. And she's going to look to show out for her hometown or her home country. So give me Yazmin Jauregui. Maybe she gets a 2nd or 3rd round TKO finish, maybe. But it's hard to bank on that. The youngster makes his return to the octagon. Raul Rosas Jr., still only 19 years old, taking on Ricky Turcios here. Sneak peek, Raul Rosas Jr. is a hefty favorite in this spot here. Okay, I want to give you guys that preview as we talk about this fight because it's a little interesting to me. I think some of you guys might like the way I'm going for this fight. Some of you guys may dislike it. Ricky Turcios, he hasn't had the best of performances as of recently. He just had a split decision victory over Kevin Natividad. Kevin was on a 3-fight losing skid after that fight, but if you dissect Kevin a little bit more so, you understand he was losing to decent competition. He's not a bad fighter. He's a tough dude. He has some heavy hands. And but that wasn't Turcios' best performance. The Aman Zahabi definitely was not his best performance. That was actually a major letdown fight for him. But Zahabi is an underrated fighter, and that was coming in after running through Dan Argueta, Ludovic Shalinian, and Brady Heiston on the Ultimate Fighter, right? Winning the Ultimate Fighter there. So that was a major letdown fight. But Turcios is much more of a veteran, which isn't saying that much, but he is a veteran. He's a veteran of the game, and he has a major experience edge here against Raul Rosas Jr. If you remember, man, he fought Boston Salmon back in 2017. I believe that was the first series of Dana White's Contender Series. He went 15 minutes with Boston there, had some moments, but he did let Boston showcase his boxing, which Boston Salmon is a very decorated boxer. Unfortunately for him, his chin never held up, but still, he has the minutes in the cage, man, and that's something that I like for Turcios here. When we're talking Raul Rosas Jr., his grappling is very dangerous and he's very aggressive early on in his fights. We've seen he's a fight finisher. But listen, I'm not going to get oversold on the victory he just had against Terrence Mitchell. Terrence Mitchell is not a UFC caliber fighter, and he's a bum. All right, he's not a UFC caliber fighter. No disrespect. He's a good fighter. If you're walking down the street and you bump into him at the bar, or if you bump into him at Walmart, he's a good fighter. All right, he's got some skills, but he's not a UFC caliber fighter. The Cristian Rodríguez fight, now C-Rod is a very talented fighter, so it's hard to completely gauge that because C-Rod is a stud, but C-Rod kind of exposed him. If you fight a crafty fight and you kind of weather the storm early on, Raul Rosas Jr. is still learning on the job. He's so young and he's going to make mistakes. And we saw his striking really isn't all that, even though he landed that big shot on Mitchell on the feet. I already said how I felt about Mitchell. I think that he can be exposed. Jay Perren's not a good fighter, no disrespect, not a UFC caliber fighter, not a big UFC type of guy. talented in his own right in the regional scene. But Mando Gutierrez, he just took another L, I believe. I believe he just took another L. So I do believe that Ricky Turcios has the ability to have this fight play out to the later rounds. Ricky Turcio has grappling in his back pocket. So when Raul Rosas Jr. is closing the distance, desperately shooting takedowns as he does, he closes the distance. He tries to rip the fight down to the mat. He'll throw some heavy shots, but he does clinch up and he shoots takedowns, relentlessly, like he did against C-Rod. And Ricky Turcios may be able to sprawl on those. And I think Turcios will get the better of the striking exchanges. I think having the experience in his back pocket is going to hold some weight here. You see him over here. He's been training at Gracie Baja Woodlands over there in Texas, in Woodlands, Texas, with guys like Brian Battle. Brian Battle's a stud. You've seen what Brian Battle has been doing in the UFC, so obviously he's getting in some solid training over there. I know Turcios is also putting time with Team Alpha Male. Turcios is 30 years old, 15 pro fights. It's got about 6 more pro fights. He's just a more mature fighter here. I'm going to edge Ricky Turcios in this spot. I'm going to say that his experience gives him a slight advantage here. Now, Raul Rosas Jr., he has that cockiness in him, that with that youth, he just, the way he comes out, I wouldn't be shocked maybe if he gets an early sub, maybe Ricky slips up and maybe Raul cracks him and kind of catches him on his heels. But if Ricky settles in, I think his striking is somewhat underrated. I could see him getting the better of the striking exchanges, and he has he puts a good amount of activity out on the feet as well, and he could pepper Raul up. I haven't seen enough from Raul striking. Landing that early shot in the Terrence fight wasn't enough for me. I saw the way he looked trying to throw against C-Rod as that fight was progressing, and I didn't see anything from him. So give me Ricky Turcios here to pull the upset off over the youngster. And I like this youngster. You guys know I like Raul Rosas Jr., but I like Ricky here. Ricky Turcios, you can catch him as high as a plus 220, plus 230 on some of these books. He's a pretty big underdog. Raul Rosas Jr. is as high as a minus 300. Open up as a minus 325 on my bookie. I believe the value's on Ricky Turcios, to say the least. Maybe Raul shows up, gets the job done, but looking at this fight, I wouldn't feel comfortable taking the youngster here. There's definitely some red flags. Take a look at some of these props that are opening up. I know you guys might not be able to see some of these in Edge, but maybe you can, and I'll spell it out for you. How about this one here? Ricky Turcios wins via decision at plus 450. That's maybe there's more value on that decision prop bet rather than just taking him on the money line, because it does jump up quite a bit, and that might be his avenue of victory. Maybe he just brings this fight to the later rounds and kind of drags Raul Rosas to the deep waters and just peppers him up and out volumes him. And Raul Rosas Jr. is a tough dude, so that's a prop you might want to look at there. But I do like Ricky Turcios to win this fight. 4-inch reach advantage on the feet as well. I like him to win via decision. Mexico versus Argentina here in the lightweight division. 2 young studs squaring off once again on this fight card. Daniel Zoliber taking on Francisco Prado. Prado had a major bounce back victory in his last fight. It was much needed because in his UFC debut, he came in with a lot of hype. He's been finishing everybody. He was undefeated, but Jamie Malarkey was able to stifle him using his grappling and hold him down on the mat. But then he bounced back with a nasty knockout over Otman Azatar, hit him with a spinning back elbow, followed him down to the mat, showing once again that he has that killer instinct and that it translates into the octagon against a UFC caliber fighter. It's impressive, especially when you take into consideration he's just 21 years old. Now, what's also pretty interesting is he seemed, I thought when I saw this matchup that he was going to be much shorter and be at a much bigger reach disadvantage. It's not really the case. Zoliber only has a 1-inch reach advantage over Prado. He is about 2 inches taller, and it's interesting because when I watch tape on them, Zoliber seems to be much more lengthy than a Prado, but I don't know. That's something to keep an eye on. Zoliber very much impressed me in his last fight where he went out there, got an anaconda choke over my boy Christos Giagos, handled Lando Venata before that. Now, the Trey Ogen fight, that was a little bit of an alarming fight. That Trey was able to kind of stifle him and kind of dictate the pace of that fight. I'm not really that high on Trey, but that was a learning experience. That fight took place back in 2022. Zoliber was like 22 years old at the time. He's still learning. And that's no worse than how Prado looked against Malarkey. If not, Prado looked worse there. So, don't hold him under the fire too much there. In the Lucas Almeida fight that was on Dana White's Contender Series, Zoliber showed that he's willing to go to war. He showed that he's resilient. He could eat some shots early on, continue to march forward and take over a fight even after eating big shots. This kid has a lot of potential in my eyes, and I think the deciding factor for me to go towards Daniel Zoliber's way and why I like him in the spot is I think we've seen more growth from him and his overall game. I think that his grappling and his submission threat, it could be a little bit of have an impact in this fight. I'm kind of seeing that as being a potential factor in this fight. And even though we talked about how the numbers don't say he has as big of a reach advantage as I thought, I still think he should be able to use his length a little bit more so from the outside. I think Prado will be looking to close the distance and land these big power shots. I think Zoliber will be pumping the jab out there. His boxing is getting more and more refined by the day, and just he really has some real natural tools that as he continues to sharpen everything up, I mean, there's some real potential for Zoliber to be a threat in this division moving forward for years. And I think you could kind of say the same thing about Prado. Prado's more raw. We need to see a little bit more from him. And that Malarkey fight was just a little bit too alarming for me. And I think if Zoliber wants to really fight an intelligent fight, I think maybe he tries to show some different layers in his game, and he's shooting singles and trying to run the pipe and bring Prado down to the mat, pushing him up against the cage and trying to get some takedowns and stifle him down on the mat. And then as you go for the grappling early on in the fight, Prado loses a little bit more of that first round pop that really makes him dangerous. And I think that Zoliber will maybe just be the better fighter going to the later rounds and just take over the fight. So that would be the game plan for Zoliber if you ask me. But both these fighters have been impressive to me. They're coming off very impressive performances in their last fights, I would say. Wasn't impressed with what I saw from Prado and his UFC debut the fight before that, but he's very young, 21 years old. Let's take a look at some betting lines here. Zoliber is a 3-1 favorite. He's a -300 right now. He opened up as a -260 and now he's a -300. He'll have the crowd behind him. I still think that line's a little steep. You can't forget the Trey Ogen fight. You cannot forget that Lucas Almeida had a lot of success early on in that fight. And if he eats shots like he ate from Lucas Almeida early on, Prado could be finishing him in the first round. All right, he can be closing the distance and finishing him in the first round. I like Zoliber, but I don't like a -300 line next to his name. An interesting prop that we'll talk about here. Fight goes the distance at +140. I know both these fighters are fight finishers, but neither of them have been finished, okay, as fighting as a pro. They've been very durable. They've never been finished. They're young. They're youthful, and maybe they both go to war, but they both survive. So +140, some value possibly next to that line there for a prop if you guys are looking for that. But I got Daniel Zoliber winning this fight, and I'll say he wins a decision. I'll say Prado hangs tough, and Zoliber has success. Prado maybe has a little success. It's a bloody fight, but Zoliber digs deep, gets the job done. The crowd goes crazy. Hey guys, real quick, just want to throw this your way. If you're looking to sign up for my official plays that I have targeted for this upcoming event, shoot me an email, a DM on Instagram or DM on Twitter. I will get back to you, give you my pricing. We're red hot right now, and I have some solid spots in this card. Do not hesitate to reach out to me. At the very least, if you guys can, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. I put a lot of time in making these videos. Thank you, boys. In the co-main event, we have huge implications for the featherweight division. I was actually just talking about this in the breakdown I did for UFC 298, as we have a new featherweight champion in Ilia Topuria. I say that he should be fighting Max Holloway if Max Holloway defeats Justin Gaethje here very soon. If Holloway loses that fight, I would say Volkanovski maybe should get another shot to get his belt back. Should get a rematch. If you take a look at dominant champs that have lost the belt as of recently, you look at the Amanda Nunez's, the Israel Adesanya's, the list goes on. They usually get rematches when they've held that belt for so long. And if you take a look at Volk's recent losses, they have asterisks next to them in a way. Taking one on short notice. The other one, people thought he won the first time against Islam, some people. But I digress because this fight has major implications, though, because the winner of this will be barking up the tree for another shot at the belt. All right. And you could almost argue, if someone makes a big statement, that they could be fighting Topuria. I know Yair Rodríguez just lost to Volkanovski, but before that was on a little 2-fight win streak, and really he's been winning a lot of fights. Just lost to Holloway, who's one of the best in the game. So, I wouldn't be shocked if Yair Rodríguez has a crazy finish and he's in the mix once again pretty quickly here. Ortega, even if Ortega gets a W here, I'm not thinking that he's that close. All right. He's been very inactive. He's only won one of his last 4 fights. And maybe I'm going to go in on Ortega a little bit here. You know, I don't have an issue with him, but he's been very inactive. People talk about his boxing skills. I mean, he knocked out an old Freddie Edgar, an old Frankie Edgar. You know, he styled a little bit on the Korean Zombie, but the Korean Zombie, man, we saw him towards the later half of his career. He was reckless in there. I don't see those boxing skills that everyone talks about. I understand that he kind of looks like he has a boxing style in there. He's rolling with punches and whatnot, but no, when you want to talk about striking, Yair Rodríguez, in my opinion, should be a big step ahead against Ortega. Okay. Ortega has been a punching bag in a lot of his fights. You take a look at the amount of strikes that have been landed on him, per minute. He's been landed at 6.66 strikes per minute. And I know a lot of that has to do with what Max Holloway did to him. Obviously, Max Holloway just boxed the brakes off of him there for 4 rounds. That really pushed the number up there. But just in general, he's been tagged up a lot. I remember when Renato Moicano was piecing him up left and right before Ortega pulled off that sub. And if I want to say something in a positive light about Brian Ortega, it is, of course, his jiu-jitsu is nasty. Okay, so if he can get this fight down to the mat, he could obviously pull off a sub. He almost submitted Alexander Volkanovski, if you guys remember how that played out. Volk was just too tough, though. And, this little message aged like milk. You got Volk turning around and winking, but I don't know, man. Cash big on Ilya there. But, back to this fight, I think it's kind of clear where I stand. I think Yair Rodríguez is going to be much sharper. He's going to land nasty strikes on Ortega, and I think he's going to get a finish. I think that Yair Rodríguez is going to get Ortega out of there. I think he's going to be damaged up. Now, Ortega is extremely tough. Maybe the doctors have to step in. Yair Rodríguez is a minus 160 currently on my bookie. And I think there's some decent value there. I like it. I think he avoids going down to the mat. And we could also take a look at the fight ends inside the distance. Not too much value there, but maybe you want to take a look at Yair Rodríguez wins inside the distance at a plus 135. Do note it's a 3-round fight, so maybe Ortega hangs tough. He's been durable, but I like Yair Rodríguez to get a finish in this fight. That's the route I'm going for the co-main event. Woo. We've been chirping it up on the mic here, boys. Take it easy on me. We got the highly anticipated rematch set to take place in the main event here. Brandon Moreno taking on Brandon Royval, 2 of the top dogs in the flyweight division. If you guys remember, these guys fought back in the day, or back in, I want to say 2020. Let's see. Back in 2020, yes. And if you remember, the fight was just starting to get going. And then unfortunately, Royval had that shoulder injury. I think something dislocated or something, and the fight had to be stopped. And the fight was really starting to get exciting. I would say that was the fight that actually put Royval on the map as being one of the most exciting fighters in the game. We fully understood that he brings it every time that he comes into the cage. And I'm happy that we get to see a continuation of what we saw in that first round here. Since that fight, obviously, Brandon Moreno has went on to become the champion. He's had some huge performances, defeating Davison Figueiredo, Kai Kara France. He's had some big performances. And Brandon Royval is coming off a failed attempt at the belt against Alexander Pantoja. So both of these fighters, you take a look at their last fights. Brandon Moreno obviously coming up short as well against Pantoja. Both of them going 25 minutes. I think you could say both fighters had a big time learning experience in the cage. Going 25 minutes, both of those fights were huge for them. I would say the failed fight for Royval was more important for him. I think that fight is going to give him a little bit more growth than Moreno. I think Moreno is a little bit more of a polished fighter already, so I don't think we'll see as much growth from him from his last fight compared to Royval. Royval knows that he needs to continue to work on his grappling and his takedown defense and just pacing himself throughout a fight and just being a little bit more experienced in there. Moreno is a very polished fighter already. I think you can argue going into this fight right now, that Brandon Moreno is as polished as we've ever seen him. 30 years old. He already has 30 professional fights. Okay. I would say that's almost the perfect amount of fights. His age is almost the perfect age. I mean, he is primed as a fighter. Don't get it twisted here. I know this is a mistake. He should not have the gold belt around his waist. We understand that, but still, he is a championship caliber fighter, the former champ. And I think he is the more primed fighter. And the reason why I'm edging him, of course, here is Brandon Royval. He needs to grow more in the grappling department. And we saw that be a bigger factor when he failed against Pantoja. And I think Moreno has the ability to change levels and mix things up and just dig a little deeper in this fight here. Of course, the crowd will be behind Moreno as well. That's something that I like for him there as well. Moreno is an awesome dude. I'm a big fan of both of these fighters. They're both phenomenal fighters. And as I said when we did the introduction, both of these fighters are in the top 10, I would say, in the game right now as the most exciting fighters in the game. They bring it every time. You know what you're getting. It's going to be a fun fight. And that's what I'm expecting to see here. But I do side with Brandon Moreno just being more complete and delivering for his country in the main event here. So let's go take a look at the betting odds on this fight. Let's see what we could talk about over here. Brandon Moreno is a -270 on my bookie. No line movement yet, so it's a high line. People think he's the more complete fighter here. He's the more mature fighter, and they expect him to get the job done. We take a look at some props. And yes, I am picking Moreno. Do I see value on that -270 line? Not positive about that, to be honest. I could see this being a really crazy scrap, and I don't know if I want to be paying almost 3-1 odds on that. But if you get it down 250 down, 240 and down, maybe you can mix it in a parlay, possibly. Over 3.5 rounds is right around a -140 right now. Open up as a +120. A lot of action coming in on that. I would have wanted to have been on that early. I mean, last time we had the Royval injury. Royval gets a little crazy in there at times, but all in all, I mean, we take a look. Royval, in his 7 losses, he's been knocked out once and subbed once. I mean, he's been pretty durable all in all, right? 5 decisions. I would aim that this fight does go to the later rounds. I would aim towards that way. Moreno's been very durable as well. He's only been subbed once in his career. He's only been finished once. I mean, he's a durable fighter. So I do kind of like that prop there. Besides that, let's see what we can see for Moreno winning a decision, a +160 line next to his name. So, I mean, the line changes drastically if you're going to go the decision route for Moreno. I think there's much more value on a +160 decision line for Moreno compared to taking him as a -270 favorite. Okay, to be clear there. All right, guys. So I'll leave you with that. As far as the picks go, Brandon Moreno is going to be barking up the tree for a potential title shot down the line again, of course, and give me him in that main event spot. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Mexico. You guys know I got to leave you with some parting words. First and foremost, I'll say, as you guys can tell, I've been putting in a little bit more work, or been putting in more work, period, with what I got going on over here. So I appreciate your guys' support so much. When you guys like these videos, subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me. I've been noticing I've been getting a lot more messages from people. People are reaching out to me. My DMs are flooded. And I can't wait to continue to show you guys the growth that I'm working on over here. And I can't wait to continue to hit the mile markers that I'm aiming at time and time again. So it just means a lot to me to have your guys' support. And we've been on the mic for a while, man. We did the recap before this. We just did this whole video. And I'm going to leave you guys with this as my parting words, man. I had an interesting situation happen the other day. Was at my local gym, and I went into the sauna. And it was weird, too, because I kind of did a little bit of a half-ass workout and went to the sauna earlier than I normally do. Normally, I would have did another 20-30 minutes before I would have hit the sauna, but I ended up actually coming back out lifting some weights after I hit the sauna. I did like a little middle sauna thing, and I normally don't do that. I bumped into this young kid, bro, in the sauna, and he said what's up to me. I was just sitting there minding my own business, and he's like, hey, what's up, man? Nice tattoos, whatever. Start talking. He was a 17 or 18-year-old kid, I think 18-year-old kid who had just moved down to Florida from New York. He was a cool dude. I could tell he was very mature for his age, and this dude just wanted to talk to somebody, and he was a cool dude, bro. He was a cool dude. I mean, it wasn't like any weird stuff. He was a good dude, and we ended up chopping it up for a bit. He had me sitting in the sauna a lot longer than I wanted to, man. I was steaming in there. I was dizzy by the time I got out of it, almost in there for 30 minutes. But this dude opened up to me, man, and he was just looking for someone to talk to. Next thing you know, just met this dude, and he's letting me know how, he's been battling, and he was, battling with suicide and just all these trials and tribulations that he's been going through. And not to go into too much details about his life, but he was opening up to me, man. And it's crazy, man. Sometimes people are just looking for somebody to talk to, and it's crazy because I'm an older dude now at this point. I'm getting older, but it's crazy because I was letting him know, I could relate to him in so many ways. And this will go for anyone that's out there. It doesn't really matter your age, but specifically people that are young. Because when I was 17 years old, I was just like that dude in a lot of ways. He was telling me how he's a little reckless, feeling like he really didn't have nothing to live for. And he's just a little bit more reckless sometimes, maybe with his decisions and trying to work on cleaning things up in his life. And that was awesome that he actually recognize that, because I feel like at my age I didn't even recognize that, and I might have been a little bit more of a wrecking ball than he was even, but different in a couple different ways. But just know, if you're young, what I try to explain to this kid, man, for you youngsters out there, your hormones are raging, you're going through a lot of changes in your life, man, and even though people say when you're younger you don't have a lot of stress or whatnot, you do have different stresses, because in your minds these little things all matter, and you don't really fully understand that they don't matter as much, and you're going through a lot in your own little way. So just chill out, put the car on cruise control, enjoy the ride, and things always get better. That's guaranteed. So don't ever do anything stupid out there and have any bad thoughts like that and ever follow through with them. Always stay positive and keep your car on the right track, and I guarantee you that life will change so much as you get older. It's just no question about it. All right, things will always get better. That's a fact. All right, so it's kind of just hormonal and this and that. So don't ever get down on yourself. Stick to the script, be positive, and you're gonna have some great times moving forward. All right, guys, that's for the youngsters. All right, we'll leave you guys with that. Hope you guys all have a profitable event. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Signing out, Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.